Prologue. Once upon, not yet. Long ago, someday, the darkness was alive. The air around young Kaelion was thick and heavy, like a suffocating fog, as he sprinted through the winding stone corridors of an ancient cave. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering with an unnatural life of their own, but Kaelion didn't stop to look. He knew where he was going. He always knew. His bare feet slapped against the cold, damp stone, echoing eerily in the cavern. Ahead, a faint light pulsed, golden and inviting. The source of that light was the door, as ancient and mysterious as his dream itself. Its surface was carved with intricate runes and symbols, their meanings lost to time. As he reached for the door's golden handle, carved with the symbol of a rose, Kaelion's heart thundered in his chest, drawn to the door like a moth to a flame. But before he could touch it, a voice erupted, loud and resonant, surrounding him as if the cave itself were speaking. "Will you sacrifice?" Kaelion skidded to a halt, panting, his hand trembling as it stretched toward the handle. The question was always the same, always pressing, a demand echoing through his very soul. But before he could answer, before he could even draw a breath to speak, the world around him shuddered, the stone walls fracturing, the darkness splintering into shards of blinding light, and then nothing. But something was different this time than any other time he dreamt the dream. This time he woke with his eyes glowing white, a radiant light pulsing from within, as if he had glimpsed something beyond the veil of reality. His breath came in sharp gasps, his body tense with an unfamiliar energy. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the glow faded, leaving only the lingering echo of something vast and unseen stirring within him. Chapter 1. Just a boy. Kaelion's eyes shot open, and he gasped for air. The faint smell of salt water and hay reached his nose, grounding him in the real world. He was back in his small, humble bedroom in Aunt Dell's cottage on the small island of Orolith. Moonlight spilled through the wooden shutters, casting soft shadows across the room. "It was just a dream," Kaelion muttered, running a hand through his damp hair. The same dream. A soft screech drew his attention to the perch in the corner of the room, where Zafarian, his falcon, cocked his head curiously. "I'm fine, Ziffy. Just the dream again," Kaelion assured her. Zafarian ruffled her feathers, letting out a low chirp of concern. Kaelion swung his legs over the side of the bed, his feet brushing against the cool wooden floor. He walked to the window, staring out at the faint lights of the town of Orolith below. The ocean sparkled faintly under the moon's glow, and for a moment the sight eased his mind. But only for a moment. Orolith was a small, unassuming island where life was simple, and the days bled together in peaceful monotony. Kaelion had spent most of his 15 years working on Aunt Dell's farm, tending to the animals and helping with the crops. It was hard work, but Kaelion didn't mind. Aunt Dell was kind and loving, and though they weren't related by blood, she was the only family he had ever known. "Kay, breakfast." Aunt Dell's voice rang out from the kitchen. Kaelion snapped out of his thoughts and hurried downstairs. Aunt Dell, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and a braid streaked with gray, placed a plate of eggs and bread on the table. After a few moments of eating quietly, Aunt Dell said, concerned, "You've been quiet this morning," she said, sitting across from him. "Dreams again?" Kaelion hesitated before nodding. "The same one." Aunt Dell frowned but said nothing. She had always been cautious about discussing his dreams, brushing them off as the product of a young boy's imagination. But Kaelion knew they meant something more. Later that day, Kaelion made his way to the far side of Orolith, where Erendor's shop stood at the edge of the forest. The shop was small and cluttered, filled with books, maps, and trinkets from far-off lands. "Ah, Kaelion," Erendor greeted, his weathered face breaking into a grin. The old man had a wild mane of silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see far more than they let on. "Come for your aunt's supplies, have you?" Kaelion nodded, placing a small pouch of coins on the counter. the soft clink of metal breaking the otherwise peaceful quiet of the shop. Arendor, the old herbalist, gave him a smile as he gathered the requested items, dried herbs, a few vials of potion, and some other oddities Kaelion had been asking for over the last few weeks. The old man's hands, worn from years of work, moved efficiently, but there was an unease in the way he moved today, as if the calm rhythm of the shop no longer matched his thoughts. As Arendor placed the last bundle into Kaelion's hands, he suddenly stopped, his kind eyes dimming. The change was subtle but undeniable. His cheerful smile faded and a cloud passed over his face. "A darkness is coming, Kaelion," he said, his voice dropping lower, tinged with a seriousness Kaelion hadn't heard from him before. Kaelion frowned, shifting uncomfortably under the old man's sudden scrutiny. "A darkness? What are you talking about, Arendor?" Arendor didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, peering into Kaelion's eyes with an intensity that sent a chill down the boy's spine. His breath hitched slightly, his brows furrowing as if seeing something that wasn't there before. He inhaled sharply, his grip tightening on the edge of the counter. "When did it happen?" he murmured. Kaelion blinked. "When did what happen?" Arendor exhaled, shaking his head. "Something has awoken in you." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I see it in your eyes." Kaelion tried to scoff, to brush it off, but the weight of Arendor's gaze pinned him in place. "You're imagining things," he muttered. "I'm the same as I've always been." But Arendor shook his head, his expression growing more troubled. "No, lad. Whatever slept inside you before is awake now, and I fear the darkness has noticed." Kaelion blinked, caught off guard. He gave a small, nervous laugh, trying to shake the unease that suddenly settled in his chest. "A darkness?" he repeated, trying to keep the conversation light, though doubt gnawed at him. Arendor leaned in closer, his voice a whisper now. "Yes, I felt it in the air, in the whispers of the trees. And I see it in you now, boy. There's something in you, something the darkness seeks." His tone was so grim it almost made Kaelion uncomfortable. Kaelion chuckled again, though it felt hollow. "Come on, Arendor, you gotta be kidding. This is Auralith. Nothing ever happens here." "It's safe, peaceful, like it always has been." He shrugged, glancing around the shop, hoping to laugh it off, but Arendor's eyes were too intense, too steady to ignore. "You must leave before it's too late. Go to where your dreams lead you. That is where your path begins. Not here, not in this sleepy town." Arendor's eyes burned with intensity. "Tell me, boy, what happened last night?" Kaelion's breath hitched. He had dreamed of the door again, the same dream that had haunted him for years. But this time, something was different. He had woken with his eyes glowing white. He could still feel the strange energy lingering in his bones, like an ember refusing to fade. Arendor nodded knowingly. "This wasn't supposed to happen until your 16th day of birth had arrived. I thought we'd have more time to prepare." His voice dropped lower, heavy with meaning. "The darkness isn't waiting anymore, Kaelion. And neither can you." He hesitated for a moment before adding, "I believe it knows where you are now." Kaelion's smile faded, replaced by a frown. This wasn't how the old man usually spoke. He shook his head, the words not fully sinking in. "What are you talking about?" he asked, feeling an uneasy knot form in his stomach. "My dreams are just dreams. I'm just a boy, Arendor. This darkness you're talking about isn't real. It doesn't concern me." He almost felt embarrassed by the weight of the conversation, like he should laugh it off, but something about Arendor's grave expression stopped him from doing so. Arendor didn't flinch. He only placed a hand on Kaelion's shoulder, his voice quieter now, but no less serious. "Not just dreams, boy. They're a calling, a whisper you can't ignore. I know you don't believe me now, but you will. When the time comes, you'll understand. There's a fire in you, Kaelion, one you're not ready to see, but it's there. And so is the darkness that will come for you when you least expect it. Trust your dreams. Trust yourself." Kaelion swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. Trust myself, he repeated, trying to steady his voice, but doubt rang clearly through his words. He didn't believe this. He couldn't believe it. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a boy. There's no darkness. There's nothing. Nothing out there. His voice trailed off, as if he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. But Erendor's gaze never wavered. When the time comes, Kaelion, you'll be ready. You'll know what to do. I've done all I can. The rest is up to you. He gave Kaelion a sad smile, one that spoke of wisdom and warnings too late to be heeded, of a future Kaelion wasn't sure he wanted to face. Kaelion stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of Erendor's words pressing against him. Although he wanted to brush it all off, there was a small, nagging part of him, one he didn't fully understand, that couldn't let go of what the old man had said. He didn't believe in it. He didn't. But as he left the shop and stepped into the cool evening air, a faint tremor of doubt shivered through him. A small, quiet voice whispered at the back of his mind, "What if Erendor's right?" Chapter 2. Creatures of the Night. The moon hung high over Aurelith, casting an eerie glow across the dense trees of the forest. The air was unusually still, save for the occasional rustle of leaves under Kaelion's boots as he made his way home from Erendor's shop. His falcon, Zepharian, glided silently above him, the occasional flap of wings the only sound to break the silence. Kaelion's thoughts were heavy, the cryptic words of Erendor replaying in his mind. Go where your dreams take you, or risk losing everything you hold dear. Dreams, Kaelion muttered to himself. Just old stories, right, Zepharian? What could they possibly mean? Zepharian let out a sharp cry as if in protest, circling lower to perch on Kaelion's shoulder. The bird's talons dug into the fabric of Kaelion's tunic. But he didn't mind. Zepharian's presence had always been a comfort. Suddenly, the forest erupted in a symphony of unnatural sounds. A guttural growl, the snap of branches, and the faint whispers of something far darker than any human voice. Kaelion froze, his heart pounding as his eyes darted around the shadowy woods. Then he saw it, a faint orange glow flickering above the trees. It came from the direction of the village. No, Kaelion whispered, his breath catching in his throat. He broke into a run, feet pounding against the earth. Zepharian launched into the air, circling ahead and shrieking warnings. As Kaelion approached the outskirts of Aurelith, the sight before him made his stomach churn. Flames consumed the small cottages, their smoke curling up into the night sky. The scent of burning wood mingled with something far more acrid, death. Figures moved through the chaos. They were monstrous beings, tall and gaunt, their skin stretched taut over sharp bones. Their eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and their movements were unnervingly fluid, like shadows come to life. Their faces bore no features save for gaping maws filled with needle-like teeth. The creatures of the night. Kaelion crouched behind a fallen log, his breath shallow as he watched the horrors unfold. The creatures moved with horrifying precision, their long claws slicing through the villagers who dared to stand against them. The cries of the dying pierced the air, mixing with the snarls of the attackers. Aunt Dell, Kaelion muttered, his eyes scanning the chaos for any sign of his aunt. One of the creatures suddenly turned, its glowing eyes locking onto Kaelion's hiding spot. It tilted its head, sniffing the air before letting out a bone-chilling screech. Run! Kaelion shouted to himself, leaping to his feet just as the creature lunged. Zepharian dove from the sky, her talons raking across the creature's face. The monster recoiled, swiping wildly at the falcon as Kaelion sprinted toward the forest. Good girl, Zepharian, Kaelion yelled, glancing over his shoulder. Zepharian continued to harass the creature, darting in and out of its reach. But more of the shadowy figures began to converge on their location. Kaelion's heart pounded as he pushed himself to run faster, the trees blurring around him. By the time Kaelion reached Erendor's shop on the far edge of the village, his lungs burned, and his legs felt like lead. He slammed through the door, collapsing onto the floor. Kaelion! Erendor exclaimed, rushing to help him up. The old shopkeeper's face was grim, his usual calm demeanor replaced by urgency. They're here, Kaelion panted, struggling to catch his breath. The creatures, they've destroyed the village. Del, I couldn't find her. Erendor's expression darkened. It has begun, then. The creatures of the night have come for you. For me? Kaelion asked, his voice rising. Why? What do they want with me? Erendor placed a firm hand on Kaelion's shoulder. You are not an ordinary boy, Kaelion. The dreams you've had, the door you've seen, it is no coincidence. Kaelion's brows furrowed, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked Erendor squarely in the eyes. How could you know about the door? Kaelion demanded, his voice tight with confusion and suspicion. What are you not telling me? You've never mentioned anything like this before. Kaelion shook his head vigorously, his mind racing in an attempt to make sense of the whirlwind of thoughts. I don't understand. This can't be happening. His voice cracked slightly, frustration bubbling over as he took a step back, his hands clenching into fists. He had been trying so hard to live a normal life, to ignore the strange feelings and visions that kept intruding on his days. But the weight of Erendor's words pressed heavily on him now, pushing him toward an unavoidable truth. Erendor sighed deeply, his grip tightening for a moment before he let go, taking a step back himself. Kaelion, you may be just a boy to you, but you're something far greater to the world. The door you saw is only a part of it. The creatures of the night, the darkness, they are coming, and they seek to twist your power for their own. But there is something in you, something that can stand against them. You must believe in yourself, boy, because the world is about to need everything you have. Kaelion shook his head again, the pieces still not fitting together. This is too much. I can't. I don't want any of this. I'm not some hero. He turned away, taking in a shaky breath. The weight of what Erendor was saying felt suffocating, but the old man's words were too heavy to dismiss, and part of him couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, deep down, he already knew this was all true. Erendor grabbed a small satchel from behind the counter and thrust it into Kaelion's hands. You must leave now. Follow the path your dreams have shown you. The door is your only hope and ours. Zephyrian landed on Kaelion's shoulder, her feathers singed but her eyes fierce. Kaelion glanced at the falcon, then back at Erendor. But what about the village? What about Del? There is nothing more you can do here, Erendor said, his voice heavy with sorrow. If you stay, you will only bring more destruction. Go, Kaelion. Save yourself, and perhaps one day you can save us all. As Kaelion hesitated, Erendor's eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. There will be others along your path, Kaelion, beings who will help you and guide you. They are tied to your journey, just as you are tied to theirs. You are a part of each other's destiny, one another's odyssey, but... He paused, his gaze piercing. There will also be many who mean you harm. Be careful who you trust. The choices you make will shape the course of your journey and theirs. Kaelion glanced at the falcon, then back at Erendor. I'll go, he said, his voice trembling but resolute. Erendor opened a hidden trapdoor in the floor, revealing a small boat tied to an underground river. This will take you to the mainland. From there, you must find your way to the door. Kaelion stepped onto the boat, Zephyrian perched on the edge, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness. Thank you, Erendor, Kaelion said, his voice cracking. Go, boy, Erendor replied, and may the light guide your path. As Kaelion stepped into the small boat, he hesitated, his voice trembling as he asked, Will I ever see you again, Erendor? The old man's eyes softened, and he gave a small, solemn nod. Yes, I promise. Kaelion's chest tightened, doubt creeping into his heart. As he spoke, but I'm no hero, though I wish I could be. Erendor stepped closer, his voice steady yet filled with an almost fatherly warmth. Then be you shall, young Kaelion. Do not be frightened of failing, your future is unveiling. His words carried the weight of prophecy, and though Kaelion's fear lingered, a faint spark of determination ignited within him as the boat drifted into the darkness. With Zephyrian at his side, Kaelion gripped the satchel tightly, The journey had begun. Chapter 3. The Star Child. The storm raged with a ferocity Kaelion had never imagined. The small ship pitched and rolled, its creaking timbers protesting against the relentless assault of the sea. Waves rose like monstrous hands, slamming into the hull with enough force to rattle Kaelion to his core. Salt water sprayed his face, stinging his eyes as he gripped the wheel with every ounce of strength he could muster. The lantern beside him swayed wildly, its flickering flame casting erratic shadows over the deck. Zephyrian screeched above the din, her wings beating furiously against the wind as he struggled to maintain her perch atop the mast. Lightning split the night sky, illuminating the chaos for brief, blinding moments before plunging everything back into darkness. "Sifi, I don't think we're going to make it," Kaelion yelled over the roar of the storm, his voice hoarse and raw. The falcon answered with a sharp cry, as if scolding him for his doubt. Kaelion shook his head, his soaked hair plastered to his forehead. "I'm trying, all right? But look around us. The sea's trying to kill us, and I'm too young to be sailing by myself. Maybe Erindo was wrong. Maybe this isn't something I can do." Zephyrian let out another cry, this one piercing and defiant. She took flight for a moment, circling above the ship before returning to the mast. Her sharp eyes seemed to fix on Kaelion, filled with a quiet yet unyielding determination. Kaelion's grip on the wheel tightened. "You really think we can do this, don't you?" he muttered, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Another wave slammed into the ship, and Kaelion stumbled but held firm. "Fine, if you're not giving up, then neither will I." Hours dragged on, the storm unrelenting. Kaelion's arms ached, his fingers numb from the cold. The stars above were hidden behind thick, swirling clouds, leaving him with no sense of direction. All he could do was fight to keep the ship afloat, to survive another moment, another wave. Finally, as dawn began to break on the horizon, the storm began to ease. The wind softened, the waves calmed, and the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. Kaelion collapsed onto the deck, his body trembling with exhaustion. The sky above was a palette of soft pinks and oranges, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the retreating clouds. He let out a shaky breath, staring up at the expansive sky. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt a flicker of hope. Zephyrian fluttered down to the deck beside him, letting out a soft chirp. "You did good, Zeph," Kaelion murmured, reaching out to gently stroke the falcon's feathers. "We made it through. Somehow." As he lay there, the exhaustion overcame him. The sound of the waves lapping against the hull and the faint cries of seabirds lulled him into a fitful sleep. The cave was as familiar as it was unsettling. Kaelion's footsteps echoed off the slick, damp walls, the air heavy with the scent of earth and stone. Ahead of him loomed the ancient door, its surface carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the dim light. He could hear his own breath, shallow and uneven. As he approached, the weight of the dream pressed down on him, a mixture of dread and inevitability. And then came the voice, deep, resonant, and omnipresent. "Will you sacrifice?" Kaelion's hand trembled as he reached for the handle. This was always the point where the dream ended, where he would wake in a cold sweat. But this time something was different. The star above him, faint and distant, began to pulse with a strange purple light. The glow bled into the cave, illuminating the door and casting long, shifting shadows. It felt alive, as if it were guiding him, urging him forward. He hesitated, his hand inches from the handle. The voice echoed again, softer this time, almost a whisper. "Will you sacrifice?" Before he could answer, the light from the star intensified, flooding the cave with brilliance. And then he woke. Kaelion sat up with a start, his heart pounding. The dream lingered in his mind, the voice in the star's light still vivid. He blinked, disoriented, as Zephy screeched from above. The falcon circled the ship, its cries urgent. Kaelion scrambled to his feet, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "What is it, Zeph?" he called out. The falcon dove toward the bow, and Kaelion followed her gaze. His breath caught in his throat. Land. The sight of the shoreline filled him with a surge of relief and wonder. Jagged cliffs rose from the water, their bases shrouded in mist. Beyond them, dense forests stretched into the distance, their emerald canopies glistening in the morning light. Kaelion steered the ship toward a small sandy cove, the gentle waves carrying him to shore. As the ship scraped against the beach, Kaelion jumped down, his boots sinking into the wet sand. Zephy landed on his shoulder, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. The air was still, the only sounds the rustling of palm fronds and the distant cry of seabirds. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the storm. Kaelion stepped into the dense forest, his boots crunching softly on the moss-covered ground. The air was cool, laced with the faint aroma of pine and damp earth. After hours of wandering through the towering trees, the forest opened up into a breathtaking meadow. Before him stretched a sea of purple flowers, their delicate petals shimmering in the dappled sunlight that pierced through the canopy above. It was a magnificent sight, unlike anything Kaelion had ever seen. The sheer abundance of bloom swayed gently in the breeze, creating waves of vibrant purple that seemed to dance to a song only nature could hear. As he moved deeper into the field, an unexpected sensation began to creep over him. A strange euphoria coursed through his veins, lightening his steps and filling his mind with an unexplainable bliss. His vision wavered, colors blending and shifting in surreal patterns. The flowers around him seemed to grow taller, their petals stretching toward the sky. He could see in the distance a child in a sundress, looking up at a rainy sky. Kaelion tried to steady himself, but the ground beneath him felt soft, as though it was cradling him. He felt himself sinking into the vibrant field as his eyelids grew heavy. The world around him dissolved into a haze of purples, golds, and silvers, and he fell into a deep, dreamy sleep. When Kaelion awoke, the field was gone. He was no longer lying among the flowers, but standing in a strange, otherworldly grove. Trees around him glowed faintly, their trunks etched with shimmering runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. And there, before him, stood a figure cloaked in light, a being of pure radiance, with star-like eyes that seemed to gaze directly into his soul. "You have been chosen, Kaelion," the being spoke, its voice a melody that resonated in the depths of his mind. "The path you seek is written among the stars." Kaelion blinked, struggling to process what he was hearing. "Who are you?" he managed, his voice trembling. "I am the Star Child," the figure said, extending a glowing hand toward him. "And your journey has only just begun." Kaelion stood motionless, staring at the being before him. The Star Child radiated a soft, otherworldly glow, as though his entire form was spun from stardust and light. His face was neither young nor old, his features shifting ever so slightly, making it impossible to determine his age. But what struck Kaelion most was his eyes. Two luminous orbs that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them, endless and unknowable, one wrapped in a star. Kaelion cleared his throat, his voice faltering. "Who? What are you?" The Star Child smiled faintly, the corners of his radiant lips turning upward, a question spoken many times by many travelers who have found me. His voice wasn't merely a sound, but a vibration that resonated in Kaelion's chest. Yet the answer always remains the same: I am what I am. "That doesn't help me," Kaelion replied, his frustration bubbling up despite the awe he felt. "I don't even know where I am, let alone why you're here. Tell me, what is this place? And who are you?" The Star Child tilted his head as though considering the question deeply. "I am one of the powers of old, a fragment of what was, and what shall always be. Before your kind set foot upon this world, long before men carved their stories into stone, this realm belonged to us, the Avatars." "Avatars?" Kaelion repeated, his brow furrowing. Kaelion ran a hand through his hair, frustration and doubt swirling within him. His voice was shaky, but firm as he tried to make sense of it all. "I've heard stories. Stories of the ancient Avatars, the ones who wielded unimaginable power, who stood against darkness and chaos. They were legends, sung about in taverns, whispered in the corners of markets, passed down through generations. But they can't be real, can they? It's all just myth. Tales to tell children, to fill our heads with dreams of heroism. He laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. We are beings of pure essence, the Star Child continued. The primal forces of the cosmos, given form by the Elder. There were many of us, scattered across this plane, some of light, some of shadow, and many in between. His voice grew softer, as though recalling memories long buried. I am the avatar of love. Love? Kaelion asked, skeptical. I thought love was supposed to be warm, gentle, but you seem. Something about you feels cold, like it could shatter me. The Star Child chuckled, a sound like wind chimes on a breeze. Do not confuse love with simplicity, young one. Love is a fire that warms the soul, but it can also burn. It is the force that binds the stars in their courses, the gravity that pulls one heart to another. It is creation itself. Kaelion took a step forward, though his legs felt unsteady beneath him. If you're so powerful, why are you here? Why now? Why show yourself to me? The Star Child's eyes gleamed brighter, and he raised a hand to gesture toward the grove around them. The glowing runes etched into the trees pulsed in rhythm with his words. Because the time has come, Kaelion. The prophecy is upon us once more. The dark light grows, and with it, the real light must answer. You are the spark that will ignite the flame. Kaelion's stomach sank. Prophecy? What prophecy? The Star Child began to pace slowly, his movements fluid and graceful, like the ebb and flow of a tide. His voice took on a lyrical quality, as if he were reciting an ancient poem. Child born beneath a crescent moon shall rise to meet the shadow's tune. With heart of fire and courage rare, he'll find the stallion and the mare. Upon the mount where heroes dare, the light shall break, the dark laid bare. Kaelion's mouth went dry. What? What does it mean? It means what it means, the Star Child replied enigmatically, his tone both playful and maddening. Stop speaking in riddles, Kaelion snapped again, his frustration boiling over. A stallion? A mare? A mountain? How am I supposed to know where to go or what to do? The Star Child stopped pacing and turned to face Kaelion directly. The prophecy speaks in riddles, because truth is rarely straightforward, but the answers are already within you, Kaelion. You have seen them. Kaelion blinked, taken aback. Seen them? What do you mean? Think, child, the Star Child urged, his voice softer now. The mountaintop, the stallion, and the mare, these are not unfamiliar to you. They've danced through the corridors of your dreams. Kaelion's breath caught in his throat. He had dreamt of such a place. A towering mountain shrouded in mist, its peak crowned with light. At its summit, two majestic figures, a stallion as black as midnight, and a mare as white as fresh fallen snow. He had never understood the dream, but now it surged back into his mind with startling clarity. I've seen it, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. In my dreams, but how could I have known? The Star Child stepped closer, his radiant form casting a soft glow over Kaelion's face. Dreams are the threads that weave the fabric of destiny. They whisper truths your waking mind cannot comprehend. You must follow them, Kaelion. Seek the mountaintop of Mount Aeon, where the stallion and the mare await. Kaelion stared at him, a mixture of awe and apprehension. And what happens when I get there? How do I stop this dark light you're talking about? The Star Child's expression grew somber. The answers lie beyond the mountain. Your journey will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. Strength alone will not suffice. You must temper your heart with wisdom and your resolve with love. Kaelion hesitated, the weight of the Star Child's words pressing down on him. Will you come with me? I don't think I can do this alone. The Star Child's luminous eyes softened. My path is not to walk beside you, Kaelion, but to guide you to your own strength. The road ahead is yours to travel, and yours alone. But someone told me. Kaelion began, then paused. My friend Arindor, he said I would meet someone to guide me. Was he talking about you? The Star Child smiled faintly, his form shimmering like a mirage. Arindor speaks with wisdom. He knew our paths would cross, but his words were not meant to tether you to me. Your guides will come when the time is right. For now, you must trust in yourself. Kaelion frowned, unsure whether to feel reassured or abandoned. I don't even know where to begin. The Star Child raised a hand. A beam of light descended from above, illuminating a narrow path leading out of the grove. Begin where all journeys begin, with the first step. The mountain calls to you, Kaelion. Follow the light, and you will find your way. Kaelion took a deep breath, steeling himself. And the dark light, what if it's too powerful? The Star Child's gaze bore into him, steady and unwavering. Light and dark are two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. But within you lies the power to tip the balance. Trust in that, and trust in yourself. Kaelion nodded, though uncertainty still gnawed at him. He turned to face the path, the glowing runes on the trees lighting his way. "Thank you," he said quietly, glancing back at the Star Child. But the grove was empty. The Star Child had vanished, his presence lingering only as a faint shimmer in the air. Kaelion looked up at Zephy flying overhead, tightened his grip on the hilt of his blade, and stepped forward, the prophecy echoing in his mind. A heart of fire and courage rare, he muttered to himself. The mountaintop awaited. Chapter 4. The Heart of Shadow. Far away from the grove where Kaelion had spoken to the Star Child, nestled deep in a land forgotten by light, there lay a vast, desolate plain of blackened earth. Above it, a perpetual storm churned, the sky an eternal swirl of ash and thunder. At the center of this forsaken realm stood a monolithic fortress, its jagged spires clawing at the sky like the talons of a beast. This was the land of Nerothar, home of the malevolent order, the heart of evil, where the darkness itself was said to breathe. And within its walls, Blackwell, the avatar of shadow, waited patiently. The air within the keep was cold and damp, reeking of decay and something older, something ancient and hungry. The great hall was dimly lit by eerie green flames that flickered along the walls. The stone floor was etched with intricate patterns of runes that seemed to shift and writhe underfoot. As though alive, Blackwell stood at the head of the chamber, his form shrouded in black robes that seemed to devour the light around him. His face, pale and angular, was framed by jet-black hair that fell past his shoulders, but it was his eyes that held the true mark of terror. Two orbs of pure darkness so deep and endless that to look into them was to risk losing yourself. In his skeletal-like hands he held a staff of obsidian, its tip adorned with a shard of black diamond. Shard flickered faintly as if it were alive, and Blackwell ran his fingers over it like a lover caressing a treasured possession. He had felt the disturbance moments ago, a ripple in the fabric of the world that had sent shivers through his very essence. Someone had touched the boy. The Star Child, that fool. "So," Blackwell murmured, his voice low and smooth like poisoned silk. "He finally awakens." The shadows in the room quivered at his words, as though they, too, could feel the weight of this revelation. Blackwell turned slowly, his robes flowing like liquid night, and gazed at the far end of the hall where his minions had gathered. They were a grotesque collection of creatures, their forms twisted and unnatural. Winged beasts with leathery skin, hunched figures with glowing red eyes, and serpentine shadows that slithered along the walls. They watched their master with a mixture of fear and reverence, awaiting his command. "Come forward," Blackwell commanded, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. A massive creature stepped out from the crowd, its wings folded against its back. Its face was a horrifying amalgamation of features, part bird, part bat, and part something else entirely. Its claws scraped the stone floor as it knelt before Blackwell. "My lord," the creature rasped, its voice a sinister snarl. "The boy," Blackwell said, his dark eyes narrowing. "He is on the move. The Star Child in his arrogance has revealed him to us. I now know where he is headed." He turned his gaze to his lieutenant, his expression hardening. "You missed him in his village after he awoke," Blackwell continued, his tone laced with icy venom. "Do not fail me again." The air in the room seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of his command. His lieutenant bowed, sweat beading on his brow as he nodded.
It won't happen again, my lord. We will find him.
Blackwell gave a cruel smile, his fingers tapping against the cold stone of his throne. See that it doesn't. If we are to have the boy, it will be on my terms. His voice dropped to a low growl. The prophecy will be fulfilled on my terms. The creature hissed, its jagged teeth gleaming in the faint light. Shall we take him, master? Blackwell's lips curled into a cruel smile. Not yet, Ryzak. First, we will test him. The boy is no ordinary child, after all. He is the one the prophecy speaks of. The creatures in the hall stirred uneasily, murmuring among themselves. The prophecy was something they all knew, a whispered warning that had haunted them for eons. My lord, another creature croaked, stepping forward. This one was smaller, its body cloaked in shadow, with glowing yellow eyes that blinked nervously. If the boy truly is the one, should we not strike him down now before he has the chance to rise? Blackwell's smile faded, and he turned his cold gaze on the creature. The shadows around him seemed to thicken, and the air grew heavier. Do you presume to tell me how to deal with a child? Blackwell asked, his voice soft but laced with menace. The creature cowered, its form trembling. No, my lord. I meant no disrespect. Good, Blackwell said, his smile returning, though it was no less terrifying. Because you see, the boy must suffer before he dies. He must feel the weight of his failure. Only then will the prophecy crumble, and this world will fall back into the darkness from which it came. He raised his staff, and the black shard at its tip pulsed with malevolent energy. The creatures in the hall hissed and growled as the shadows around them grew darker and colder. The boy's heading for the mountaintop, Blackwell continued, his voice echoing through the chamber. The fool thinks he can reach the stallion and the mare, as if they will offer him salvation. We will be there to greet him. He turned his gaze to Vryzak. Take the horde and scour the land, find the Star Child, hunt him down. Bring me his eye. I don't want the avatars interfering. Vryzak grinned, his wings unfurling with a sickening crack. As you command, my lord. And I, Blackwell pointing his staff, will corrupt the land around him, poison his mind with fear, let him feel the embrace of darkness before the end. Blackwell lowered his staff, and the room grew still once more. My darkness will swallow this world whole, and not even the Elder will be able to stop it. The creatures roared with their approval, their cries filling the hall with a cacophony of malice. They began to scatter, their twisted forms disappearing into the shadows to carry out their master's will. Blackwell watched them go, his dark eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He could already feel the boy's presence, a faint ember of light flickering in the distance. It would not burn for long. He turned and ascended the steps to his throne, a massive jagged seat carved from obsidian. Sitting upon it, he gazed into the shard at the tip of his staff, his mind drifting to the prophecy. The child born beneath a crescent moon, the heart of fire, the stallion and the mare. Such pretty words, he murmured to himself, his voice dripping with contempt. But words are wind. Prophecies can be broken just like bones. He leaned back, his smile returning. Let the boy come. Let him believe he has a chance. It will make his fall all the sweeter. The shard pulsed again, casting eerie shadows across the hall. Outside, the storm raged on, and the creatures of the night took to the skies, their wings blotting out what little light dared to penetrate the darkness. Blackwell closed his eyes, his mind reaching out across the plain. He could feel the boy moving, could sense the faint glimmer of hope that clung to him like a fragile thread. But hope was a fleeting thing. And Blackwell would see to it that this boy's hope was snuffed out, just as he had done to so many others before him. Soon, he whispered, his voice carrying through the dark. Very soon, this plain will belong to the shadows once more, and I will stand as its king. The storm outside roared in agreement, and Nerethar shuddered as though the earth itself were bowing to its master. Blackwell sat in silence, his dark smile never wavering, as the hunt began. Chapter 5. The darkness that lingers. Kaelion trudged along the path that the Star Child had illuminated for him, his mind spinning with questions. The trees seemed to loom taller now, their shadows growing long and deep as the light faded behind the canopy. Every step he took felt heavier, the weight of the Star Child's words pressing down on him. The prophecy, the mountaintop, the stallion and the mare, and the dark light. The Star Child's cryptic riddles had done little to settle Kaelion's unease. What was this darkness he spoke of? And why did it feel like Kaelion had always known it was there, waiting? He couldn't put it into words, but there had always been a sense of something lurking just beyond the edge of his awareness, like a shadow at the corner of his vision that vanished when he turned to look. Another name for the darkness, he murmured aloud, testing the phrase. But what is it? The woods grew quieter the farther he walked. The usual sounds of rustling leaves and birdsong were conspicuously absent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Kaelion tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, his eyes darting to every flicker of movement in the shadows. A sudden rustling to his left made him stop in his tracks. He turned sharply, his blade half drawn, but there was nothing there, just a patch of darkness that seemed deeper than the rest. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing faintly in the stillness. The shadows didn't respond, but the air grew colder, sharp enough to sting his skin. A low whisper drifted through the trees, too faint to make out the words, but unmistakably there. Kaelion's heart pounded in his chest. "Who's there? Show yourself!" The whisper grew louder, becoming a chorus of overlapping voices. They weren't speaking words, but something older, something primal. The sound wrapped around him, pressing against his ears and clawing at his mind. And then from the darkness something began to take shape. A figure emerged, its form shrouded in an inky black mist that writhed like living smoke. Its eyes glowed faintly, a sickly black that pierced through the gloom. The shadows around it seemed to bleed into the forest, dimming the light and turning the air thick and heavy. Kaelion took an involuntary step back, his sword fully drawn now. "What are you?" The figure tilted its head, a gesture that felt both curious and mocking. When it spoke, its voice was a fractured echo, as though a dozen different mouths were speaking at once. "I am the darkness that lingers," it said, the words slithering into Kaelion's ears. "The shadow behind every light, the silence that follows every song. You know me, Kaelion. You've always known me." Kaelion's grip on his sword tightened. "You're the dark light the Star Child spoke of." The figure chuckled, a sound like dry leaves crumbling. "Dark light. A poetic name for me, but a name nonetheless. I've been called many things throughout the ages. A curse, a blight, a nightmare. But I am none of those things." "Then what are you?" Kaelion demanded, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. "I am truth," the figure said, stepping closer. "The truth that no one wishes to see, the truth that lies buried beneath your stories of heroes and light, the truth that love cannot save you, and courage is but a fleeting spark." Kaelion forced himself to hold his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to run. "You're wrong," the Star Child said. "The Star Child," the figure interrupted, its voice dripping with disdain, a relic of a forgotten age, clinging to his ideals like a child clutching a broken toy. "Did he tell you the full story, Kaelion? Did he tell you what the avatars really were?" Kaelion hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "He said they were powers of old, forces of the cosmos." The figure laughed again, a hollow, echoing sound that seemed to reverberate through the air like the tolling of a distant bell. "Forces of the cosmos? Powers of old?" He makes it sound so noble. But the avatars were nothing more than usurpers. They shaped this world to their liking, carved it in their image, and called it order. But when the Elder got tired of us, they needed a new toy. "You, man." Kaelion's heart pounded in his chest as his confusion began to warp into something darker, something more dangerous. His mind screamed for clarity, for truth. But the words hit him like stones, each one weighing him down, suffocating him. He shook his head, his voice trembling at first. Then rising in defiance, "You're lying," Kaelion spat, his hands clenched at his sides. "You're trying to twist the truth. I've heard the songs, the avatars. They fought for balance, for life, for all of us. They were the first children of the Elder." The figure interrupted, his voice cold and mocking, but there was a venom in it that struck deep. "But when the Elder cast us aside and forced us to live amongst you foul creatures, I wanted more." Kaelion clenched his teeth, the air around him seeming to vibrate with the intensity of his emotions. "No. You are blind, boy. We avatars were nothing but pawns in a game much bigger than your tiny mind can comprehend, and now you are the final piece in that game. The prophecy says you'll be defeated," he said, his voice firm. "It says the light will prevail," Kaelion exclaimed. The figure's smile widened, a grotesque mimicry of joy. "Ah, yes. The prophecy, a story written by those who fear the dark, to soothe themselves as they cower in the light. But tell me this, Kaelion. How many prophecies have you seen fulfilled? How many promises of salvation have gone unanswered?" Kaelion opened his mouth to respond, but found he had no answer. The figure stepped closer, the shadows around it creeping toward Kaelion like tendrils. "You will learn in time. The Star Child has sent you on a fool's errand. There is no salvation waiting for you on the mountaintop. Only more riddles. More lies." Kaelion raised his sword, the blade glinting faintly in the dim light. "Stay back." The figure stopped, its glowing eyes locked onto Kaelion's. "You cannot fight me, boy. Not yet. You are but a flicker of light in an ocean of shadow. But we will meet again, and when we do, you will understand the truth. The dark light is not your enemy. It is your destiny." Before Kaelion could respond, the figure dissolved into the mist, its form unraveling like smoke in the wind. The shadows receded, and the forest slowly came back to life. The rustling leaves, the distant calls of birds, the soft whisper of the breeze. Kaelion stood frozen, his sword still raised, his mind racing with everything the figure had said. He didn't know what to believe anymore. The Star Child's riddles, the figure's accusations, the prophecy, destiny, he muttered bitterly, lowering his blade. What kind of destiny is this? But deep down, he knew there was no turning back. The mountaintop still called to him, and whatever awaited him there, truth or lies, salvation or doom, he would face it. Kaelion sheathed his sword and continued down the path, the shadows lingering in his mind long after they had faded from the forest. Chapter 6. The Fox in the Woods. Kaelion trudged along the narrow forest path, the weight of the Star Child's prophecy pressing heavily on his mind. The towering pines above him whispered faintly in the breeze, their shadows playing tricks on his already exhausted eyes. Beside him, Zephy, his loyal falcon, soared low, her wings cutting through the air silently as if she sensed her master's unease. The trek to the mountaintop stretched ahead of him, leagues of wilderness filled with dangers he could scarcely imagine. Kaelion felt small and powerless, his thoughts a chaotic swirl of doubt and fear. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. "Why me? Why now?" Zephy let out a soft call, circling back to land gracefully on his shoulder. Her presence was comforting, but it didn't answer the questions that burned in his heart. Just days ago, he had been tending to animals on his quiet island home, living a simple life with Aunt Dell. A life that, until now, he had thought would last forever. A lump formed in his throat as he thought of her. Had the creatures of the night destroyed all of Orolith? Was she safe? Did she even know what had happened to him? He stopped walking, his legs trembling from fatigue, and turned his gaze towards Zephy. "Zephy," he said softly, stroking her feathers, "I need you to go back to Orolith. Find Aunt Dell and make sure she's okay. Tell her I'm alive, that I'm okay." Zephy tilted her head, letting out a soft whistle of protest. "I know," Kaelion said, forcing a weak smile. "I don't want you to leave either. But I have to know." "Please, Zephy, you're the only one who can do this." The falcon hesitated for a moment before giving a sharp cry of understanding. With a powerful beat of her wings, She took off into the night sky, her silhouette vanishing into the canopy above. Kaelion watched until she disappeared completely, the ache of loneliness settling deep in his chest. He wrapped his cloak tighter around himself and continued down the path, the air growing colder as the sun dipped below the horizon. The hours passed slowly, and as the shadows deepened, Kaelion's footing became more treacherous. The ground, slick from an earlier rain, gave way beneath him as he stepped too close to the edge of the trail. "Whoa!" he shouted, his arms flailing as he slid down a steep incline. Mud and rocks tumbled with him, and he landed with a thud at the bottom of the slope, his sword clattering beside him. Groaning, he pushed himself up, brushing mud from his face. "Perfect," he muttered. "Just perfect." As he reached for his sword, a soft rustling in the bushes caught his attention. He froze, his heart pounding as he scanned the darkness. From the shadows emerged a small, furry creature no taller than Kaelion's knees. It resembled a fox with bright orange fur and a bushy tail, but its emerald green eyes shimmered with an intelligence far beyond that of an ordinary animal. Draped over its shoulders was a tiny cloak, fastened with a wooden clasp shaped like a leaf. The fox tilted its head, its nose twitching as it regarded Kaelion curiously. "Hello?" Kaelion said cautiously, gripping his sword but keeping it lowered. The fox chirped in response, its tail flicking playfully as it took a few steps closer. Kaelion blinked, unsure what to make of this strange creature. "Do you understand me?" The fox nodded, its movements quick and almost theatrical. "Okay, great," Kaelion said, relieved to have found someone or something that seemed friendly. "I don't suppose you know the way to the great mountain top? You know, the one where the stallion and the mare stand." He felt even more ridiculous saying those words out loud. And to a fox of all things. But suddenly, the mention of the mountaintop changed everything. The fox's playful demeanor vanished instantly. It stood rigid, its ears pricking forward, as its nose lifted to the air, sniffing intently. Its green eyes darkened, and a low growl escaped its throat. Kaelion frowned, taking a step back. "What's wrong?" The answer came in the form of a blood-curdling screech from above. Kaelion's stomach dropped as the sky filled with the sound of leathery wings and harsh cries. The creatures of the night had found him. Before Kaelion could react, the fox sprang into action. With a blur of motion, it pulled two slender sticks from beneath its cloak. The sticks glowed faintly with a golden light, and with incredible speed, the fox launched itself at the first wave of attackers. Kaelion could only watch in stunned silence as the fox fought. It moved like a blur, spinning and leaping with an agility Kaelion had never seen. The glowing sticks struck the creatures with precision, sending them shrieking back into the shadows. A hulking beast lunged at Kaelion, its fangs bared and claws extended. Panicking, he raised his sword and swung wildly, managing to fend it off but barely. His heart raced as he faced another creature, its glowing red eyes locking onto him. The fox, mid-battle, glanced back at Kaelion. "Hold your ground, boy," it shouted, its voice surprisingly deep and authoritative for such a small creature. "You have a sword, use it." Kaelion nodded, swallowing his fear. He tightened his grip on the hilt and stepped forward, striking at the creature with all the strength he could muster. His blade connected, and the creature let out a pained howl before retreating. The battle raged on, and Kaelion found himself slowly gaining confidence. He wasn't a skilled fighter, but he fought with determination, knowing that he had no other choice. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the creatures fled into the night, their cries echoing through the forest. Kaelion collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The fox stood nearby, its glowing sticks now extinguished. It brushed a bit of dirt from its cloak before turning to Kaelion with a sly grin. "You're lucky I was here," it said, its voice lighter now, almost teasing. Kaelion stared at the fox in disbelief. You can talk?" The fox rolled its eyes. "Of course I can talk. What kind of avatar would I be if I couldn't?" "Avatar?" Kaelion repeated, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The fox gave an exaggerated bow. "Feric, Avatar of the Woods, at your service. Though I suppose introductions could have waited until after we weren't being attacked by shadow fiends." Kaelion blinked, trying to process this new revelation. You're an avatar? Like the Star Child?" Feric laughed, a light musical sound. "Ha, that glowing stick in the mud? Please, we're nothing alike. He's all about riddles and grandeur. Me, I prefer to keep things simple." Kaelion shook his head, overwhelmed. "This can't be happening. I'm not some chosen hero. I don't know how to fight or save the world. I'm just a farm boy from Morrilith." Feric's playful grin softened into something more understanding. "You don't have to believe in yourself right now, kid. That's normal. But trust me when I say this. The world doesn't care where you came from. It only cares what you do." Kaelion looked away, his doubts gnawing at him. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail," Feric said simply, sitting beside him. "But you won't. Because the people who love you are counting on you. And because deep down, you are stronger than you think. You'll see it soon enough." Kaelion said nothing, staring into the darkness of the forest. Feric stood and brushed himself off, his playful energy returning. "Come on, kid," the fox said, nudging him with a paw. "We've got a mountaintop to find." Kaelion sighed, forcing himself to his feet. As they began walking, he glanced down at Feric, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. Chapter 7. Wings of Despair. The moon hung heavy in the darkened sky as Zephy soared high above the vast ocean. Her wings sliced through the cold night air, her instincts pulling her homeward. The rhythmic beating of her wings felt heavier with each passing league, weighed down not by exhaustion, by the dread that gnawed at her heart. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. As the island of Morrilith came into view, Zephy let out a soft caw of relief. The familiar sight of rolling green hills and the clustered rooftops of the small village usually brought her comfort, but tonight the island looked eerily dark. No lanterns glowed in the windows of the village homes. No smoke rose from chimneys. The place that had once been full of life and warmth now looked cold and lifeless. Zephy descended cautiously, her sharp eyes scanning the landscape below. Then she saw it. The village was in ruins. Fires smoldered in the remains of homes, their once sturdy walls reduced to heaps of ash and rubble. The fields Kaelion had tended with Aunt Dell were torn apart, the crops trampled and left to rot. A foul stench hung in the air, a mixture of smoke, decay, and something far darker, something unnatural. Zephy's heart pounded as she flew closer to Kaelion's house, nestled at the edge of the forest. The house had always been a sanctuary, a place of safety and love. But as she approached, she saw that the creatures of the night had not spared it. A low growl echoed through the air, followed by cruel laughter that made Zephy's feathers bristle. She perched on a tree branch just outside the house, her piercing eyes narrowing as she took in the scene below. Inside the ruined home, Aunt Dell sat bound to a chair, her face pale but defiant. Around her swarmed a group of shadowy creatures, their twisted forms lit by the flickering light of a dying fire. Their leathery wings twitched restlessly, their glowing red eyes fixed on Aunt Dell with a hunger that made Zephy's blood run cold. One of the creatures, a hulking beast with jagged horns and claws like daggers, stepped forward, its voice a throaty rasp. "Where's the boy, old woman? Tell us, and your suffering will end." Aunt Dell spat at the creature, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. "I don't know where he is, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell monsters like you." The creature let out a roar of frustration, its clawed hand striking Aunt Dell across the face. She winced, but held her head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Zephy's talons gripped the branch tightly as she watched, her fury building with each passing moment. She had to act. She couldn't let them hurt Aunt Dell any more than they already had. With a sharp cry, Zephy dove from the tree, her wings spread wide as she aimed straight for the largest creature. Her claws raked across its back as she swooped past, drawing a pained roar from the beast. The other creatures turned their attention to Zephy, their red eyes gleaming with malice. They hissed and snarled, spreading their wings as they prepared to attack. Zephy circled back, diving at another creature and slashing at its face. She moved with the precision of a predator, her speed and agility keeping her just out of their reach. But for every creature she struck, two more seemed to take its place. The odds were against her, and she knew it. Still, she fought on, her love for Kaelion and Aunt Dell driving her forward. The hulking creature roared, its clawed hand swiping at Zephy and narrowly missing. "Enough of this! Bring the bird down!" The smaller creatures swarmed Zephy, their sharp claws grazing her wings and tearing at her feathers. She screeched in pain but refused to retreat, determined to protect Aunt Dell at any cost. But the numbers were overwhelming. One of the creatures managed to grab Zephy by the leg, dragging her down toward the ground. She thrashed and pecked at her captor, breaking free just as another creature lunged at her. Zephy's chest heaved as she hovered above the chaos, her body battered and bleeding. She looked down at Aunt Dell, who met her gaze with tear-filled eyes. "Go, Zephy," Aunt Dell whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the creatures. "Go back to Kaelion. He needs you." Zephy hesitated, her heart torn. She didn't want to leave Aunt Dell behind, but she knew the older woman was right. Kaelion needed to know what had happened. He needed to know the danger they were all in. With a mournful cry, Zephy turned and flew toward the open sky, her wings beating furiously as she raced away from the island. The creatures screeched and roared behind her, but they did not give chase. As the island faded into the distance, Zephy's tears mingled with the wind. She had failed to protect Aunt Dell, and the guilt weighed heavily on her. But she couldn't let despair consume her. She had to get back to Kaelion. She had to warn him. Hours later, Kaelion sat by the fire, staring into the flickering flames. Feric had curled up nearby, snoring softly, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with his breathing. The forest around them was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Kaelion's thoughts were a tangled mess as he replayed the events of the past few days. The prophecy, the Star Child, the battle with the creatures of the night. It all felt like a dream he couldn't wake from. His heart ached as he thought of Aunt Dell. Was she safe? Did she even know what had happened to him? A sudden cry pierced the silence, and Kaelion looked up to see Zephy descending from the sky. Her flight was unsteady, her wings tattered and her body streaked with blood. "Zephy!" Kaelion shouted, rushing to meet her. The falcon landed in his arms, trembling as she let out a series of frantic cries. Kaelion's heart sank as he realized something was terribly wrong. "Zephy, what happened? Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice shaking. Zephy let out another cry, her sharp eyes locking onto his. She flapped her wings weakly, as if urging him to understand. Feric stirred, his ears twitching as he woke. "What's all the commotion?" he grumbled, his eyes widening as he saw the state Zephy was in. "Great spirits, what happened to her?" Kaelion's voice broke as he looked at Feric. "Something's happened to Aunt Dell. I just know it." Zephy gave a sharp nod, her beak opening and closing as she let out a mournful sound. Kaelion's chest tightened, his worst fears confirmed. The creatures of the night had found his home, and Aunt Dell was in danger, or worse. "I have to go back," Kaelion said, his voice filled with determination. Feric stepped forward, placing a paw on Kaelion's leg. "Hold on, kid. Charging in there without a plan is suicide. You don't even know what you're up against." "I can't just leave her," Kaelion said, his voice cracking. "She's all I have left." Feric sighed, his green eyes filled with uncharacteristic seriousness. "I get it. But if you go back now, you'll just be playing right into their hands. Those creatures don't just want her, they want you. And if you fall, this whole plane falls with you." Kaelion clenched his fists, his mind racing. He felt helpless, torn between his love for Aunt Dell and the weight of the prophecy that loomed over him. Zephy nuzzled against him, her soft cries filled with sorrow. Kaelion closed his eyes, taking a deep, shaky breath. "I'll save her," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "I don't know how, but I'll save her," Feric nodded solemnly. We'll figure it out, kid. But first you need to stay alive. For her. For everyone. Kaelion looked down at Zephi, his resolve hardening. He couldn't afford to fail. Not again. As the fire crackled in the darkness, Kaelion silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect the people he loved, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. The Light in His Eyes. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden rays over the winding dirt road as Kaelion, Feric, and Zephi continued their journey toward the mountaintop. Zephi perched on Kaelion's shoulder, her sharp eyes scanning their surroundings, while Feric trotted ahead, his bushy tail swishing behind him. Kaelion's mind wandered, and he broke the silence with a question that had been gnawing at him for days. "Feric," he began, hesitating for a moment, "I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but why are you so different from the Star Child?" Feric turned his head, his ears perking up. "Different how?" Kaelion chuckled. "Well, for one, you're a lot easier to talk to. He came off, I don't know, like he was above it all. A bit pompous, if I'm being honest." Feric let out a bark of laughter. "Pompous, huh? Can't say I disagree. The Star Child has always been peculiar. He's got this whole holier-than-thou vibe that drives the rest of us avatars up the wall. I mean, did you know there were whole centuries when he didn't speak to any of us? Just sat meditating, staring into the Hilson black hole as if the rest of the universe didn't matter." Kaelion's eyes widened. "Centuries? Meditating? What does that even accomplish?" "Nothing practical, that's for sure," Feric said with a smirk. "But you have to understand, we avatars aren't all cut from the same cloth. Just like people, we have different personalities, strengths, and quirks. The Star Child likes to think of himself as a guide, but he's so detached from this world that he forgets what it's like to actually live in it." Kaelion nodded, taking it all in. "And what about you? You don't seem very godlike." Feric stopped walking and turned to face Kaelion, his green eyes gleaming with amusement. "That's because I've always preferred being among the creatures of this world. While the others were busy brooding over the cosmos or meddling in the affairs of kings, I was here, running through the forests, making friends with the mortals. I guess you could say I'm more of a people person." Kaelion smiled. "I think I like you better than the Star Child." "Flattered, kid," Feric said, resuming his pace. "But don't underestimate him. For all his flaws, the Star Child sees things the rest of us can't." Kaelion fell silent, pondering Feric's words as they approached a small village nestled in a valley. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the sound of laughter and clinking mugs drifted from a nearby tavern. The tavern was warm and bustling, filled with the scent of roasted meat and freshly baked bread. Kaelion and Feric found a table near the corner, away from the rowdier patrons. A young handmaid approached, her apron stained with ale. "What can I get you, lads?" she asked with a tired smile. Kaelion kept it simple. "Just a loaf of bread and some cold apple cider, please." The handmaid nodded and turned to Feric, who was sitting upright in his chair like he owned the place. When Feric spoke, the handmaid's eyes went wide, and she stumbled backward. "A talking fox?" Her voice loud enough to draw stares. Feric rolled his eyes. Yes, a talking fox. Can we move past that? I'll have 4 tall pints of mead." Kaelion gawked. "Avatars drink mead?" Feric shot him a sour look. "Not all of us, kid. But I happen to have a refined palate." Kaelion shook his head in disbelief as the handmaids scurried off to fetch their order. Zephi, perched on the edge of the table, let out a soft chirp, as if sharing in his incredulity. The tavern grew noisier as the evening wore on, and Kaelion was just finishing his bread when the doors burst open. A group of rough-looking men swaggered in, their loud voices and boisterous laughter silencing the room. They dragged a young woman in with them, her wrist bound and her face streaked with tears. The leader, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, shoved her forward. "Get us some ale, wench, and be quick about it." The girl stumbled but obeyed, her hands trembling as she poured their drinks. The men jeered and barked orders at her, treating her like a slave. Kaelion's fists clenched, and he rose from his seat. "I can't just sit here and watch this." Feric jumped onto the table, blocking his path. "Hold on, kid. I get it. It's horrible. But there are bigger issues at stake. You can't risk drawing attention to yourself." Kaelion's voice was firm. "If I'm supposed to save the world, I might as well start with her." Before Feric could stop him, Kaelion marched over to the group, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Let her go," he said, his voice steady and commanding. The men turned to him, their faces twisted with amusement. "And who are you, lad? Mommy didn't teach you any manners?" The leader sneered. Kaelion drew his sword, its blade catching the firelight. "Let her go." The men burst into laughter. One got up and shoved young Kaelion to ground with absolute ease. But their mirth was short-lived. Kaelion grew angry and lunged at the nearest thug, his blade slicing through the air with precision. The man fell to the floor with a cry, clutching his shoulder. The others drew their weapons, their laughter replaced by anger. They lunged at Kaelion, but he moved with a speed and grace that surprised even himself. His training with Aunt Dell's old blade came flooding back, and each swing of his sword felt guided by something greater. One by one the men fell, their weapons clattering to the floor. Kaelion's eyes burned with determination as he fought, his movements fluid and purposeful. The leader, now the last man standing, grabbed the girl and held a dagger to her throat. "Take another step, boy, and she dies." Kaelion froze, his heart pounding. The room was silent save for the girl's muffled sobs. But then something shifted. A faint glow filled the room, emanating from Kaelion's eyes. The leader hesitated, fear flickering across his face. In a blur of motion, Kaelion was upon him. The man's dagger fell to the floor as Kaelion disarmed him with ease, and the next moment, the leader lay unconscious at his feet. Kaelion knelt beside the girl, cutting her bindings and helping her to her feet. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "What's your name?" Kaelion asked. "Bethara," she said, her voice trembling but steady. Feric watched from the table, a knowing smile on his face. Morpheus was right, he muttered to himself. He's got the light in his eyes and the heart of a true champion. Kaelion didn't hear Feric's words, too focused on Bethara and the weight of what had just happened. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a bond that would shape the rest of his journey. Chapter 9. The Reluctant Companion. Kaelion had expected gratitude, maybe even admiration, after rescuing Bethara from the group of drunken thugs. Instead, as they left the tavern and ventured down the moonlit path, he found himself facing an entirely different reality. Bethara, far from being thankful, had been nothing but curt and dismissive since they had walked out the door. She trudged ahead of him, her boots kicking up small puffs of dirt, while Zephy flew overhead, casting wary glances down at her. Feric padded silently by Kaelion's side, occasionally shooting him a sympathetic look as Bethara's sharp remarks filled the quiet night. "So," she said with a snide tone, "this grand journey to save the world of yours, what's the deal with that? Some kid hero fantasy you read about in a storybook?" Kaelion clenched his jaw, trying to remain calm. "It's not a fantasy. I've been chosen to stop the dark light." "There's a prophecy," Bethara interrupted him with a short, incredulous laugh. "A prophecy? Really? Let me guess, some ancient mysterious figure came to you in a dream and said, 'You're the chosen one.' How original." Kaelion stopped walking and turned to her, his voice firm. "Look, I don't care if you believe me or not, but the fate of this plane depends on this. I didn't choose any of this, it was thrust upon me." Bethara rolled her eyes. "Right. Because beating up a couple of old drunk fools in a tavern is exactly the kind of thing a world-saving hero does." Kaelion felt his face flush with frustration. "You didn't seem to mind when I was fighting them to save you." Bethara turned to face him, her hands on her hips. "And I appreciate it, don't get me wrong, but saving me isn't exactly the same as defeating some great evil. Let's be real, what chance do you have against the darkness or whatever you're calling it?" Before Kaelion could respond, Feric spoke up, his voice calm but cutting. "You might want to tread carefully with your words, girl. There's more to this boy than meets the eye." Bethara glanced down at Feric, her lips curling into a smirk. "And this talking fox, what's his deal? Some enchanted pet you picked up along the way?" Kaelion groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "He's not a pet. He's an avatar, one of the ancient powers of this world. He's here to guide me." Bethara snorted. "An avatar? Please. Those are just fairy tales. He's just a weird fox with a big mouth." Feric's tail twitched, but he refrained from retorting. Instead, he whispered to Kaelion, "She's lucky I'm feeling merciful tonight." Kaelion shook his head in disbelief and decided to change the subject. "Why were those men after you in the first place?" he asked, his tone softening. Bethara stiffened slightly before replying, her voice carrying a hint of defiance. "I hustled them. Card games, dice rolls, little sleight-of-hand tricks. I've been doing it for years to get by. Turns out they don't take kindly to being cheated. When they found out, they beat me and told me I'd be their slave until I paid back my so-called debt." Kaelion's stomach twisted at the thought. For how long? Bethara hesitated before answering, her voice quieter. "It's been 3 years." Kaelion's heart sank. He felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at the cruelty she had endured. "No one deserves that," he said firmly. Bethara shrugged as if trying to downplay it. "It's just the way the world works. You survive however you can." Kaelion looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. "You don't have to live like that anymore. Come with us. You don't have to believe in the prophecy, but you'll be safe with us." Bethara let out a sharp laugh. "Safe? You're just a kid with a sword and a talking fox. If anything, you'll slow me down." "A kid? You're about the same age as me. Then why are you still here?" Kaelion shot back, his patience wearing thin. Bethara crossed her arms. "Because we're headed in the same direction. There's a town up ahead where I can start over, and I might as well let you and your magical fox play bodyguard until I get there." Kaelion felt his temper flare. "You're unbelievable. I offer to help you, and this is how you repay me? By treating me like I'm some kind of idiot?" Bethara raised an eyebrow. "If you think being a hero is all glory and gratitude, you're in for a rude awakening, kid." Kaelion clenched his fists, but before he could respond, Feric stepped between them. "Enough, both of you. We've got bigger problems than your little spat." Bethara rolled her eyes but fell silent, while Kaelion muttered under his breath and resumed walking. Zephy flew down and perched on his shoulder, chirping softly in an attempt to comfort him. As the night deepened, the tension between Kaelion and Bethara remained palpable. They walked in silence for hours, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Kaelion's thoughts churned with frustration and doubt. Why had he even offered to help her? She clearly didn't want it. And yet, he couldn't shake the image of her chained and beaten. Nor could he ignore the faint flicker of vulnerability he'd seen in her eyes when she spoke of her past. Eventually, they stopped to rest in a small clearing. Feric scouted the perimeter while Zephy kept watch from above. Bethara sat a few feet away from Kaelion, fiddling with a deck of cards she'd pulled from her pocket. "Why do you even bother?" Kaelion asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. Bethara glanced up at him, her expression guarded. "Bother with what?" "Surviving," Kaelion said. "If you think the world is so awful and everyone's out to get you, why keep going?" Bethara's eyes narrowed. "What kind of question is that?" "It's an honest one," Kaelion replied. "You act like you don't care about anything, like nothing matters. But you're still here, still fighting to live. Why?" Bethara hesitated, her fingers stilling on the cards. For a moment, Kaelion thought she wouldn't answer. But then she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "Because I don't want them to win," she said. "The ones who beat me, who used me, who tried to break me, I survived because I refused to let them take that from me." Kaelion nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. "Then why not fight for something bigger than yourself? Why not fight for a world where no one has to go through what you did?" Bethara looked away, her jaw tightening. "That's your dream, not mine." Kaelion sighed, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't know how to reach her, how to make her see that this journey wasn't just about him. But as he watched her shuffle her cards with practiced precision, he couldn't help but feel that, Despite her resistance, she was meant to be part of this. The morning sun rose, casting golden light over the clearing as they prepared to set off again. Bethara was still distant, but she didn't protest as they resumed their journey. Kaelion, though still frustrated, resolved to be patient. He didn't know how long she would stay with them or if she would ever truly believe in the prophecy, but for now, she was here, and that was enough. As they walked, Feric trotted up beside him and murmured, "She's rough around the edges, but there's something about her. Don't give up on her yet." Kaelion glanced at Bethara, who was walking ahead with her head held high. "I won't," he said softly. "But she's not making it easy." Feric chuckled. "Nothing worthwhile ever is." Kaelion smiled despite himself and tightened his grip on his sword. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he was beginning to realize that his journey would be shaped as much by the people beside him as by the battles he would face. And though she didn't know it yet, Bethara was now a part of that journey. Chapter 10. When doubt takes hold. The stars shone brightly overhead as Kaelion, Ziphi, Feric, and Bethara set up camp for the night. The crackling fire cast flickering shadows on the nearby trees, and the crisp mountain air carried the faint scent of pine. They shared some of the stale bread Kaelion had gotten at the tavern. It was peaceful, at least for now, but Kaelion's mind was anything but. He sat near the fire, his sword resting beside him, Zephi perched on his shoulder. Her sharp eyes glinted in the firelight as she preened her feathers. He stroked her head absent-mindedly, his thoughts miles away. "Why are we even doing this?" he muttered to Zephi. She chirped softly in response, tilting her head to look at him. Kaelion sighed. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do when we get there, Zephi. Erinder told me to follow my dreams, and the Star Child said something about a stallion and a mare. That's it. I'm traveling hundreds of leagues, risking my life, all because of some vague prophecy I don't even understand." Zephi nuzzled against his cheek, her way of offering comfort. He smiled faintly. "You've always been there for me," he said, his voice soft, "ever since I found you." A rustling sound interrupted his thoughts, and he turned to see Bethara approaching the fire. She had her arms crossed, her usual guarded expression in place. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the ground. Kaelion shrugged. "Go ahead." Bethara settled down across from him, glancing at Zephi. "So, what's the story with your bird? She seems pretty attached to you." Kaelion smiled, the memory of their first meeting washing over him. "Zephi's not just a bird, she's family. I've had her since I was 5 years old." Bethara raised an eyebrow. "5? You don't seem like the falcon rescuing type." Kaelion chuckled. "I wasn't at first, but let me tell you the story." He leaned back, his eyes reflecting the firelight as he began. "I grew up on a small island called Auralith with my Aunt Dell. One day when I was about 5, I was playing near the woods when I heard this awful screeching sound. I followed it and found a baby falcon tangled in some vines, with a giant python circling her." Bethara's eyes widened. "A python?" Kaelion nodded. "It must have been at least 15 feet long, and it was getting ready to strike. I didn't know what I was doing, I just knew I couldn't let that baby falcon die. So I grabbed the biggest stick I could find and charged at it, yelling at the top of my lungs." Bethara smirked. "You? At 5 years old? Against a python?" Kaelion grinned sheepishly. "I didn't say it was a good plan. The snake lunged at me and I barely dodged it. I swung the stick as hard as I could, but it broke in half. That's when I realized I needed to outsmart it instead of fighting it head on." Bethara leaned forward, intrigued. "What did you do?" "I used the broken stick to jab at the snake's eyes, keeping its attention on me while I reached for the falcon with my other hand. The snake hissed and coiled, but I managed to grab the baby and run." Zephi let out a soft chirp, as if to confirm the story. Bethara shook her head in disbelief. "You were either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Kaelion admitted. "That's how Zephi and I became a team. She's been with me ever since." Bethara looked at Zephi. a hint of softness breaking through her tough exterior. "I guess that's kind of impressive," she admitted. Kaelion smiled, but his expression soon darkened as another memory surfaced. "What's wrong?" Bethara asked, noticing the shift. Kaelion hesitated before speaking. "It's my Aunt Dell. I know she's in trouble because of me. The creatures of the night, they attacked my village because they were looking for me. And if they couldn't find me, they would have gone after her. I can't stop thinking about it." Bethara was silent for a moment. "You're sure she's still alive?" "I have to believe she is," Kaelion said, his voice trembling. "She's all the family I have left." Bethara frowned, her usual sarcasm absent. "And yet you're here, heading to some mountaintop instead of going back to save her." Kaelion looked up sharply. "You think I don't want to? Every part of me wants to go back and make sure she's safe. If I don't do this, if I don't stop the dark light, then saving her won't matter, because there won't be a world left to save her in." Bethara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I get it," she said finally. Kaelion blinked. "You do?" Bethara stared into the fire, her fingers idly tracing the hilt of her sword. "When I was young, everything was decided for me," she began, her voice steady but laced with something deeper, something wounded. "My parents weren't just nobility. They ruled. And when a king gives an order, you obey, whether you want to or not." Kaelion blinked in surprise. "You're a princess?" Bethara flinched at the word, her lips curling slightly. "Don't call me that," she muttered. "That title means nothing to me." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I wanted more than duty. I wanted to live, to find adventure, meaning, something beyond wearing dresses and smiling for foreign lords who only saw me as a bargaining piece. My parents didn't even notice me. On my 11th birthday, they forgot I existed. They didn't even acknowledge that it was my birthday. They were too busy hosting dinner parties and whatnot." Her fingers tightened around the hilt. "That night, I made my choice. I had stashed supplies in the woods, food, clothes, everything I needed to disappear. I waited until the guards were distracted, then I slipped out, running toward my own future." She exhaled sharply. "But I never made it far. Just as I reached the tree line, I heard the alarms. I thought they had discovered my escape, but I was wrong." Her voice grew quieter. "The castle was under attack. Fire and steel tore through the place I had called home. I heard screams. I saw the flames licking at the towers. But I didn't turn back." Her jaw tightened and her eyes darkened with guilt. "I kept running. I told myself I was too weak to help, that I would have only died alongside them." Her gaze flickered to Kaelion. For the first time he saw the weight she carried. "Maybe that was true, but I've spent every day since wondering, if I'd been stronger, would they still be alive?" Kaelion felt a pang of sympathy. "Bethara, I'm so sorry." "Don't," she said sharply. "I don't need your pity. What happened to them? It made me who I am. I swore I'd never be weak again, that I'd never let myself get too attached to anyone, because at the end of the day you can only count on yourself." Kaelion shook his head. "That's no way to live." "It's the only way to survive," Bethara shot back. They stared at each other in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Bethara broke the tension with a bitter laugh. "You're a strange one, Kaelion. Charging off to save the world when you don't even know why." Kaelion sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I have to try. Maybe it's stupid, maybe it's impossible, but if there's even a chance I can make a difference, I have to take it." Bethara's gaze softened, and for the first time she seemed to see him in a different light. "Maybe you're not as foolish as I thought." Kaelion smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment."